The passage has a few key points. The primary subject is subcultures. The classification of these is given. We are told that it is classified as, or they are classified as, enhancing, orthogonal, or counterculture, each exemplifying a different level of congruence with the dominant culture's values. So we have the aspect of the dominant culture's values, and each of these types, these classifications, they have a different level of congruence with the given dominant culture's values. A very significant word here is the word congruence. It is actually something on which the answer would depend. So let's just keep that in mind. Then we have the explanation of these three types: the enhancing subculture, we have orthogonal subcultures, and then we have a counterculture. So there are certain forms, the enhancing ones, in which uh, the subcultures adhere to the dominant organizational cultural values even more enthusiastically than members of the rest of the organization. The orthogonal subculture, members of orthogonal subcultures, they both embrace the dominant culture's views and hold their own set of distinct but not conflicting values. Finally, members of a counterculture disagree with the core values of the dominant culture and hold values that directly conflict with the core organizational values. So these explanations of these three subtypes, or these three classifications of subcultures, they can be simplified and boiled down to one statement. Let's look at the options. Option A says, subcultures in an organization are defined by how much the members of the organization follow the dominant values or differ from them. Now, this would otherwise be perfect. It gets the primary subject correct, subcultures. And then it says they're defined by how much the members of the organization follow the dominant values or differ from them. So this covers most of the key aspects, but it does skip out on the mention of the classifications. So classified as enhancing, orthogonal, or counterculture, it's not subcultures which are defined by how much the members of the organization, they follow the dominant values or differ from them. Rather, how much the members follow or differ from the dominant values of the organization, that actually gives us the classification. It doesn't give us the definition of subcultures. So this is actually distorted. So A is incorrect. Option B says organizational subcultures are a product of the value system of the dominant culture, values, and to what level they are adhered to by the members of the organization. Now we have quite a lot of problem with this. First off, this changes the subject to organizational subcultures. We don't necessarily call them organizational subcultures. Yes, these are discussed in the context of an organization in the later arguments, or the defining statements of these three types of subcultures. But the primary subject is, after all, not organizational subcultures, but just subcultures. That's the first problem. The second problem is, we see it is mentioned, are a product of the value system of the dominant culture values and to what level they are adhered to. So this again omits the mention of classification, of the classifications. There's no mention of enhancing, orthogonal, or counterculture, not even a mention of classification. The third problem with this is to what level they are adhered to by the members of the organization. Now, this is something, as we've seen, it depends on the word congruence. If we just say how much these different subcultures adhere to the core values, or the dominant cultural values of the organization, that is incorrect, because not all of these subcultures, not all of these classifications, they adhere. Let's not forget, there are countercultures, the members of which disagree with the core values of the dominant culture, and they hold values that are directly in conflict with the core organizational values. So we can't just say adhered. Then again, we are talking about this general term congruence. Congruence means harmony, balance. So there is balance, but balance doesn't necessarily mean that everyone is actually adhering to the dominant cultural values. So this actually also distorts the premise. So we have 3 levels of problems with option B. B is incorrect. Option C tells us subcultures are classified as enhancing, orthogonal, or counterculture. Sounds good, because finally we have one, the primary subject, subcultures, maintained. Second, we have a mention of the classifications, which is important, each suggesting a different level of adherence to the two dominant organizational cultural values. Now, we see that while this started off well, it made the same, at least one of the mistakes that B does. It just mentions different levels of adherence. What we need is different levels of congruence. Or if we are absolutely hell-bent upon including adherence, then we have to say adherence as well as disagreement, as well as difference. As we see, which is one thing that A got right, follow the dominant values or differ from them. So following the dominant values or adhering to the dominant values or differing from them, that is the basis of the classification. So we still don't have a good summary here. This also is distorted, or one could call it limited. C is incorrect. Option D says, subcultures can be classified according to the balance between the level of adherence to the dominant organizational culture and holding opposing views, opposing values. This is, while not perfect, we see that this is closest to the passage. First off, it gets the primary subject correct, subcultures. Second, it doesn't mention enhancing orthogonal counterculture, but we don't need that. If it were here, it would be good. But if it is not there, we need one mention of it. And this does that by mentioning classified, by using the word classified. Subcultures are classified as, or classified on which basis. So we didn't name the classifications of subcultures, enhancing, orthogonal, and such, but we did mention according to the balance between. The word balance fits perfectly with congruence. Congruence essentially means harmony or balance. So this is very well worded. It says the level of adherence to the dominant organizational culture and holding opposing values. So we have, yes, adherence, which is basically, say, the aspect of enhancing, also to a degree an aspect of the orthogonal subcultures, and holding opposing values is an aspect of countercultures. So this actually covers a lot of ground. One could compare this with option C because option C comes very close, but we find that in skipping the mentioning of the naming of these 3 classifications, these two are almost the same in length. There's very little, half a word of difference, but in that, B actually covers one very important aspect, and that is differing from the dominant organizational culture, or as this option tells us, holding opposing views, which is very relevant to counterculture. So we find that by comparison, C is inferior, D is the better choice. So we can qualify D. That is the correct answer.